Blood dripped onto my thesis pages as my mother laughed in the corner. "You don't deserve a future," my father snarled, standing over me with the shattered remains of my laptop still in his hands. 2 days before my graduate thesis was due. 18 months of work destroyed in seconds. If you've ever felt like your own family was your biggest enemy, this story is for you. Hit subscribe, because what happened next will shock you. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my own family became my greatest enemy, and accidentally made me stronger than they ever imagined possible. But before we jump into the chaos, I need to set the scene for you. Have you ever felt like you were born into the wrong family? Like your dreams were so foreign to them that you might as well be speaking a different language? If so, you're going to relate to every word of this story. Growing up in Millbrook, a small industrial town where ambition went to die, I was the anomaly in the Thompson household. While my father Harold spent 27 years at the steel mill, wearing his calloused hands like badges of honor, I was the weird kid who got excited about science experiments and spelling bees. You see, in my father's world, there were only 2 types of people. Those who did real work, and those who were too soft to earn an honest living. Guess which category he thought I fell into? My mother Doris wasn't much better. She learned early in their marriage that disagreeing with Dad meant days of cold silence or explosive arguments. So she became his echo, reinforcing every cruel comment, every dismissive remark about my book obsession. But the golden child? That was my older brother Frank. He dropped out of high school junior year to work at the mill alongside Dad. "Now that's a real Thompson," Dad would announce, practically beaming with pride. "None of that book nonsense. Just honest work." Before I continue, let me know in the comments, have you ever been the black sheep in your family? The one who dared to dream differently? Because what I'm about to tell you might hit close to home. While Frank was collecting praise for the bare minimum, I was quietly building an escape plan. 3rd grade. I won my first academic recognition. My teacher told my parents I had remarkable analytical skills. Dad stared at the wall. Mom nodded politely. They forgot her words before we reached the parking lot. 5th grade, district spelling bee champion. Local newspaper printed my photo. I was beaming, clutching my certificate. My parents never showed. Had to work overtime, Dad claimed. I later overheard him telling Frank it was ridiculous to celebrate knowing how to spell words any normal person could just look up. But here's where it gets interesting. Every dismissal, every eye roll, every "that's nice, dear" in that flat, disinterested tone. It wasn't breaking me. It was forging me. Like steel in fire, except I was becoming something my father couldn't recognize or control. 7th grade brought state recognition for a science project on local water quality. When the principal called personally to share the news, Mom's response, "That's nice," same tone she used for the weather forecast. "We're not wasting gas so you can play scientist," Dad scoffed when I asked for a ride to the state competition. "That won't put food on the table." You know what's funny? He was right about one thing. It wouldn't put food on their table. But it was about to change my entire life. High school became my sanctuary. I joined every academic club, stayed late, came home as little as possible. My English teacher, Mr. Vaughan, became the first adult to see my potential. "Your mind is exceptional, Sarah," he told me once. "Don't let anyone dim your light." Those words. They became my armor. When I became valedictorian, the principal personally invited my parents to the ceremony. They didn't attend. Dad had a fishing trip with Frank. Mom claimed a migraine. I delivered my speech to a crowd of strangers, fighting back tears while watching other students run to hug their proud parents. Mr. Vaughan approached afterward with a small wrapped gift, a journal with an inscription, "Your journey is just beginning. The world needs your voice." That night, I made a promise that would change everything. I would be the first Thompson to attend college. Not just any college, the best one that would accept me. But here's where the story gets really interesting, and where you'll start to see how toxic people often become the very fuel for our greatest transformations. Quick question for you amazing viewers. What's the biggest dream someone in your family told you was impossible? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me more than you know. I applied for scholarships in secret. Used school computers since we had no internet at home. Created a special email address my parents would never discover. Even convinced teachers to serve as my contact to avoid mail coming to our house. While my classmates shared acceptance letters with supportive families, I hid mine under a loose floorboard beneath my bed, taking them out at night to reread by flashlight like treasure maps to another life. Graduation day arrived. As families celebrated around us, Dad's only question was, "So, you start at the mill next week, right?" When I finally found the courage to tell them about my full scholarship to State University, the silence lasted 10 excruciating seconds. Then Dad threw his plate against the wall. "So you think you're too good for honest work? Too good for your family? Books and theories don't feed people, Sarah. Real work does." Mom stared at her lap while Frank laughed. "Always knew you were weird." That night, I packed everything I owned, knowing the bridge I was crossing was burning behind me. But you know what? Sometimes you have to burn bridges to light the way forward. My first day of college orientation felt like stepping onto another planet. Families everywhere, helping unload cars packed with supplies, mothers fussing over dorm arrangements. I arrived alone on a Greyhound bus with one suitcase containing everything I owned. "Your parents coming later?" my roommate Jasmine asked while her mother organized their shared closet space. "They had to work," I lied. The first of many such lies I would tell. The scholarship covered tuition and basic room and board, but nothing else. No laptop, no spending money, no safety net. I found work-study in the cafeteria and a second job waiting tables at a nearby diner, working nights and weekends to survive. 3 weeks in, my carefully constructed budget collapsed when I got strep throat. The clinic visit and antibiotics wiped out my savings. With nowhere else to turn, I swallowed my pride and called home. "Money problems already?" Dad grabbed the phone from Mom. "Welcome to the real world, college girl. Maybe now you'll understand what actual responsibility feels like." He hung up. That night, I slept in my car for the first time. For 2 weeks, I alternated between my Honda's back seat and the 24-hour library, showering in the gym before classes. Nobody noticed. I had become invisible, just another tired student among thousands. But here's what my family never understood about me. Every obstacle they put in my way only made me more determined to prove them wrong. To why Thanksgiving, when most students went home, I picked up extra shifts at the diner. Double pay, plus generous tips from customers who felt sorry for the college girl working on the holiday. With those funds, I secured a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. It was in that cramped little space, eating ramen noodles and studying by lamplight, that I discovered my true calling: psychology. Specifically, family psychology. Isn't it ironic? The very dysfunction that nearly broke me became my area of expertise. Every theory I studied, every research paper I read, it was like holding up a mirror to my own childhood experiences. Dr. Lewis, my intro psychology professor, noticed my unusual insight. "Have you considered majoring in psychology?" she asked after I submitted a paper analyzing the psychological impacts of economic insecurity on family dynamics. If only she knew how personally I understood those impacts. Junior and senior year flew by in a blur of academic excellence and financial struggle. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. Several professors encouraged graduate school applications, offering glowing recommendations. When my graduate school acceptance arrived, with a teaching assistantship covering most expenses, I felt vindicated. In a moment of optimistic weakness, I called home with the news: more school. Mom sighed. "When do you plan to get a real job, Sarah?" "This is a real job, Mom. I'll be teaching and doing research." Dad's voice cut in from the extension, so the perpetual student continues to avoid growing up. Some of us have been working real jobs since we were 16. I ended the call, reminding myself why I limited contact in the first place. Yet some childish part of me still hoped for approval, for acknowledgement that my achievements meant something. Graduate school intensified everything. The pressure, the competition, the workload. But for the first time, I felt truly in my element. I focused my research on family psychology, specifically how parental attitudes toward education impact children's achievement and self-concept. Every statistical correlation I studied reflected moments from my childhood. I was simultaneously the researcher and the subject, though I kept this carefully hidden behind academic language. 3 months into the program, my car needed major repairs that wiped out my emergency fund. With no other options, I swallowed my pride and asked to stay with my parents temporarily while I saved for a new vehicle. To my surprise, they agreed. Maybe, I thought naively, time had softened their attitudes. The first week went surprisingly well. I set up a workspace in my old bedroom and established a routine. Leave early for campus, return late, minimize interaction time. Mom occasionally left plates of food with my name on them. Dad limited his commentary to occasional mutters about career students. This fragile peace allowed me to focus on my thesis, educational resilience in first-generation college students, family dynamics and psychological coping mechanisms. My committee approved it enthusiastically. Dr. Westfield agreed to serve as my primary advisor. Everything was falling into place. But as my work intensified, so did the tensions at home. What started as subtle digs escalated into daily commentary. Dad took particular issue with my laptop. It represented everything he despised about intellectual pursuits. Staring at that screen all day will rot your brain, he'd announce, deliberately turning the TV to maximum volume whenever I was working. People who type for a living are just pretending to work. Mom fell back into her familiar pattern. Your father just wants what's best for you. Maybe a nice office job would be simpler. Simpler. As if I had spent my entire life fighting to escape simple. Frank began dropping by more frequently, always when I was deep in concentration. He'd barge in without knocking, interrupt my work, remind me of family obligations I'd supposedly forgotten. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I worked through the nights when the house was quiet, catching a few hours of rest before heading to campus. Every obstacle they created only fueled my determination. 6 weeks before my submission deadline, Dr. Westfield reviewed my draft and recommended substantial revisions. The same week, technical issues corrupted some backup files. I lost days of work, forcing me to reconstruct complex analyses from memory. The pressure was mounting, but I was so close to finishing. Quick pause. If you're finding this story as intense as I'm telling it, make sure you hit that like button. And if you've ever had to overcome family opposition to achieve your dreams, drop a flexed biceps in the comments. Your support means everything. The night before everything changed, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. She thinks she's so smart with all those books and big words, Dad was saying. What good is a fancy degree if you still live with your parents at 24? Frank had his own place at 19. I worry about her, Mom replied, not in defense, but in agreement. All this education, and for what? No husband, no children, just papers nobody will ever read. Waste of time and money, Dad concluded. Should have gone to work after high school like a normal person. Their words burned like acid, but they also crystallized something in me. With renewed determination, I worked 20 hours straight, fueled by coffee and pure spite. By dawn, I had reconstructed the lost analyses and implemented Dr. Westfield's revisions. My thesis was 90% complete with 48 hours remaining until submission. That's when Dad escalated his interference to a level I never saw coming. The final 24 hours became a war. Dad barged into my workspace every 30 minutes with trivial demands. Mom insisted I take breaks to help with household tasks that suddenly couldn't wait. Your thesis will still be there tomorrow, she said dismissively. Family comes first. I retreated to the dining room table, the only space with adequate room for my materials. Dad deliberately turned the TV in the adjacent living room to maximum volume. When I asked him to lower it, He launched into a tirade about ungrateful children and my house, my rules. I worked through the night. As sunlight filtered through the curtains, I completed the final revisions. Just formatting and one last proofread remained. The submission deadline was noon. I was exhausted but triumphant. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel proud. The thesis wasn't just good. It was genuinely insightful work that made meaningful contributions to my field. That's when Dad entered the dining room, coffee mug in hand, and everything changed forever. "Still playing student, I see," he commented, observing my workspace with narrowed eyes. "Normal people are heading to work right about now." I kept working, determined not to engage. "Just a few more hours. Good morning, Dad. I'll be done soon. My submission is due at noon." Submission. Fancy word for homework. When I was your age, I was supporting a family. Mom appeared, surveying the dining room table with pursed lips. "All these papers everywhere. We need to set the table for breakfast." "I just need a few more hours," I explained, desperation creeping into my voice. "This is due today. It's the culmination of 2 years of work." "Work?" Dad scoffed. "Typing isn't work. Try carrying steel beams in 100-degree heat. That's work. Your mother asked you to clear the table for breakfast." Dad's voice carried that dangerous edge I recognized from childhood. It wasn't a request. I couldn't yield. Not today. Not with everything at stake. "I'll eat later. You can use the kitchen counter. I just need to finish this." His face darkened. Ungrateful. That's what education does. Makes kids think they're too good for family meals. At 9:30, Frank burst through the front door. "Family breakfast. Mom said you were cooking, Dad." He peered over my shoulder at my laptop. "Still writing that paper? Thought you'd be done by now." "Thesis," I corrected. "And yes, I'm finishing it today." Frank laughed. "Thesis, paper, homework, whatever. Same thing, right? Hey, did I tell you I got that promotion? Supervisor now. Full benefits, pension, the works." Dad beamed with pride he'd never once directed toward my achievements. "That's my boy. Real work, real rewards. None of this degree nonsense that never ends. Internet sabotage." By 11:30, my nerves were frayed, but triumph was within reach. All that remained was the final save and submission through the university portal. Then the internet connection failed. I stared at the error message in disbelief. I checked my phone. No service there either. With mounting dread, I walked to the living room where Dad sat watching TV with perfect connectivity. "The internet's out in the dining room," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I need to submit my thesis in 30 minutes. Can you check the router?" He didn't look away from the screen. "Internet's working fine for me." The pieces clicked into place. "Did you do something to the internet?" A small, satisfied smile played at his lips. "My house, my internet. Maybe I put on parental controls. Maybe the dining room is a no-computer zone now." 18 months of work. Countless all-nighters. My entire future, jeopardized by his petty power play. "I need to submit this thesis," I said, voice shaking with restrained fury. "This is my future, Dad." He laughed, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "Your future? That's a joke." He stood suddenly, looming over me. "What future does endless schooling give you? Frank has a house, a promotion, a real life. What do you have? A stack of papers nobody will read and student debt." "I need to get this submitted," I said, moving toward the router. "I'll reset the connection myself." His hand shot out, gripping my arm with bruising force. "You don't touch anything in my house without permission." "Let go of me." I yanked my arm away. "This is insane. I just need internet access for 5 minutes." "Your work," he sneered. You mean your excuse to avoid real responsibility? Your high and mighty education that makes you think you're better than us. That's when decades of suppressed rage crystallized into perfect clarity. This has never been about my education, I said, the realization breaking through like sunlight. This has always been about your insecurity. You're threatened by the fact that I chose a different path. His face contorted with fury. You ungrateful little. And that's when I committed the unforgivable sin. I interrupted him. No. I'm not ungrateful. I'm ambitious. I'm determined. And I'm not going to let you sabotage my future because you don't understand it. I turned my back, heading to collect my laptop. I'd drive to campus if necessary, even if the 30-minute commute meant missing the deadline. I heard him following, his heavy footsteps vibrating through the floor. I reached for my laptop just as he entered the room. You think you're so much smarter than everyone, he said, voice dangerously quiet. So much better than your family because of your precious education. I continued packing, time running out. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he demanded. When I kept working, his hand slammed on the table. I said, look at me. I turned, clutching my laptop like a shield. I have to go. We can talk later. There's nothing to talk about. You need to learn respect. You need to learn your place. My place is not here, I replied, the truth ringing clear. It never was. The assault. That's when something in his eyes changed. A final restraint snapping. In that instant, he was no longer my father, but simply a man who couldn't bear to be defied. Your future, he repeated, voice eerily calm. That's a joke. Time seemed to slow as his fingers closed around my laptop. For a bizarre moment, I thought he might just take it away until the deadline passed, a childish punishment. I couldn't have imagined what came next. With strength born of decades of physical labor and incandescent rage, he wrenched the laptop from my grasp and raised it high above his head. Our eyes locked for a fraction of a second. There was no hesitation, no moment of paternal reconsideration, just cold, deliberate fury. The laptop came down with brutal force against the side of my head. The impact exploded through my skull like a gunshot. Pain bloomed instantly, bright and searing. The corner struck just above my right temple, and I felt the skin split open. Warm wetness trailed down my face as the blow sent me staggering backward until my shoulders hit the wall. My vision blurred, darkening at the edges. Through the disorientation, I saw my laptop hit the floor, screen separating from keyboard with a sickening crack of plastic and electronics. 18 months of work. Shattered in an instant. You don't deserve a future, Dad snarled, standing over me as I slid down the wall. You're just a leech. But the most shocking sound came next. Laughter. My mother's high, nervous laughter from the doorway where she stood watching. Not intervening. Not calling for help. Not showing an ounce of maternal protection. Just laughing. Harold, she finally said, still giggling inappropriately. That's enough now. Blood trickled into my eye. My thesis, my graduate degree, my future lay in pieces on the floor. And this was simply, enough now. Clean yourself up, Dad muttered. And clean up this mess too. They walked away. I heard them in the kitchen. Casual domestic sounds of coffee being poured, the refrigerator opening and closing. As if nothing extraordinary had happened, I remained on the floor for several minutes, stunned into immobility. When I finally touched my temple, my fingers came away red. The cut was deep. I'd probably need stitches. More concerning was the nausea and dizziness suggesting a possible concussion. With trembling hands, I gathered the broken pieces of my laptop. The screen hung by a single wire. The case was cracked. Fragments scattered across the floor. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Not even a flicker of life. The machine containing my entire academic career was dead. The escape. Where do you think you're going? Mom asked as I prepared to leave, washcloth pressed to my bleeding head. To the hospital. Then to campus. Your father is still upset. Maybe you should apologize for provoking him. The absurdity hit me like a second blow. Apologize? For pursuing education? For expecting basic human respect? For having my skull split by my own father? I'm not apologizing, I said steadily. And I'm not staying here another minute. Don't be dramatic, Sarah. It was just a little argument that got out of hand. This wasn't an argument, Mom. This was assault. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back, Dad's voice boomed from the living room. Ungrateful children don't get second chances in this house. Mom gave me a look that managed to be both pleading and accusatory. See what you've started? Just apologize and this will all blow over. Moment, I saw the dynamic that had shaped my entire life with perfect clarity. The enabler and the aggressor, working in tandem to maintain control through fear and manipulation. Goodbye, Mom, I said quietly. You'll regret this, she called after me. When your fancy education leaves you alone with no family, you'll regret choosing books over blood. With my broken laptop clutched against my chest and blood still trickling down my face, I walked into the blinding sunlight of a future suddenly untethered from everything I'd worked toward. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, because sometimes rock bottom becomes the solid foundation on which you build your comeback. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, thoughts scattered by pain and shock. Eventually, I pulled into Riverside Park and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The tears came suddenly and violently. For the little girl whose achievements were dismissed, for the teenager who hid acceptance letters like contraband, for the graduate student whose father destroyed her work out of spite. The rescue. Then my phone pinged. Dr. Westfield, Sarah, noon deadline approaching. Please confirm submission status. Instead of panic, strange calm descended. If my family had taught me anything, it was resilience against impossible odds. This was just one more barrier. I typed back, emergency situation. Heading to campus now. Please advise about late submission protocol. Her response came immediately. What kind of emergency? Are you all right? I decided on complete honesty. Physical injury requiring medical attention. Laptop destroyed. Cannot access thesis files. Will explain in person. Go to University Health Services immediately. I'll meet you there. Don't worry about the thesis right now. Her concern, so different from my family's reaction, brought fresh tears to my eyes. At the health center, Linda, the nurse who attended to me, listened as I told the unvarnished truth. My father smashed my laptop against my head when I tried to submit my thesis. This injury is consistent with what you're describing, she said carefully. I'm documenting everything thoroughly. Dr. Westfield arrived while the doctor was examining me. She took one look at my injury and her professional composure cracked. My God, Sarah. What happened? As the doctor confirmed, I had a mild concussion and needed 4 stitches. Dr. Westfield pulled a chair beside the examination table. The nurse mentioned something about your laptop being used as a weapon. Can you tell me what happened? I recounted the events. Her expression grew increasingly concerned. First, she said when I finished, your thesis isn't lost. You sent me a draft 2 days ago. We have that version at minimum. Relief flooded through me. Second, what happened is assault. The campus police office is next door. Would you be willing to speak with them? The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and official statements. Throughout it all, Dr. Westfield remained by my side, advocating with various university departments. She helped secure an emergency extension for my thesis submission and arranged for IT services to attempt data recovery from my damaged laptop. This is what academic communities are supposed to do, she said firmly when I tried to thank her. Support each other. What happened is unconscionable. The next morning, a knock at my temporary housing door revealed a university IT technician holding a small external hard drive. We were able to recover most of your files, he explained. The hard drive was remarkably intact given the damage. There it was, my thesis, complete except for the final edits I'd made that morning. Compared to what could have been lost, this was a miracle. Despite concussion protocols advising against screen time, I spent the next several hours completing the final formatting. My head pounded, vision occasionally blurred, but determination overrode physical discomfort. By late afternoon, I submitted the completed thesis through the university portal. Thesis received. Submission recorded. Those 5 words represented victory over every obstacle my family had placed in my path, and why thesis defense was postponed by a month to accommodate recovery. When the day finally arrived, I stood before my committee with confidence born of surviving the worst and continuing anyway. At the conclusion, Dr. Westfield announced what I'd scarcely dared hope: highest honors. Unanimous decision. The validation was sweet, but more important was the internal knowledge that I had persevered against extraordinary obstacles. The restraining order against my parents was granted without contest. They sent a brief statement through their lawyer claiming I'd always been prone to exaggeration and attention-seeking behavior. The judge reviewed medical records, police report, and photographs before declaring their response, concerning in its dismissiveness of documented assault. The order was approved for maximum duration. The career breakthrough. As spring turned to summer, unexpected news arrived. The department had an opening for a research assistant position with stipend and campus housing. Your thesis has attracted attention from several faculty members, Dr. Westfield explained. The intersection of family dynamics, educational resilience, and first-generation student experiences is increasingly relevant to our institutional goals. I accepted immediately. 2 months after the assault, Frank appeared at my office door, looking simultaneously defiant and uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked, usual bravado notably absent. "That depends on what you want to say." "I'm not here to defend them," he said quickly. "What Dad did was wrong. Really wrong." The admission shocked me into silence. Frank had always been our father's echo. I should have said something that day. Should have stopped him or helped you afterward. I know that. He produced a small box from his jacket pocket. "I got you something. To replace what was broken." Inside was a new laptop, significantly nicer than the destroyed model. "Thank you," I said carefully. "But a laptop doesn't fix what happened." "I know. Nothing really fixes it. But I've been thinking about how they treated you compared to me. How they made your achievements seem worthless while praising me for basic stuff. It wasn't fair." Coming from Frank, this acknowledgement was seismic. "Will you keep in touch?" he asked. "Not with them, just with me. I'd like to know how you're doing." "We can try," I offered. The ability to selectively reconstruct family connections on my own terms was a form of power I'd never possessed before. Professional triumph. As my research position evolved, I began incorporating my experiences into outreach programs for first-generation college students facing family opposition. Family resistance to your education often says more about their insecurities than your choices, I would tell students. Your pursuit of knowledge threatens their status quo, challenges their worldview, sometimes highlights opportunities they never had. 1 year after the assault, I received an invitation to present my research at a national conference on educational equity. Standing before hundreds of educators and researchers, I felt profound vindication. Educational resilience isn't just about academic persistence despite socio-economic barriers, I explained during my presentation. It's about maintaining self-belief when the people who should be your strongest supporters become your most significant obstacles. The standing ovation was gratifying, but the real reward came during networking when student after student approached to share how my framework helped them understand their own family dynamics. 2 years after the laptop incident, I stood in my new apartment, hanging the framed copy of my graduate degree on the wall. The scar on my temple had faded to a thin silver line, visible only if you knew where to look. My phone chimed. "Curriculum Committee approved your proposed course on family dynamics and educational resilience for next semester. Congratulations, Professor Thompson." Professor Thompson. The future my father claimed I didn't deserve was now undeniably mine. The most profound lesson wasn't about family trauma or academic resilience. It was about the human capacity to transform pain into purpose, to alchemize the lead of rejection into the gold of self-actualization. We cannot control the families we're born into, but we can choose who we become and the families we create for ourselves. Let me ask you, have you ever had to overcome opposition from people who should have supported you? How did you find the strength to pursue your dreams despite their discouragement? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your courage inspires me more than you know. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm show this to others who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming impossible odds, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Before you go, I want to leave you with this thought. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people give us is showing us exactly what we don't want to become. My father's rage became my resilience. My mother's enabling became my independence. Their limitations became my liberation. The scar on my temple isn't just a mark from that day. It's a reminder that I survived the worst they could do and still achieved everything they said was impossible. To everyone watching who feels trapped by family expectations, undermined by those closest to you, or told your dreams are too big, this is your sign. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Your potential isn't limited by their lack of vision. Sometimes you have to disappoint the people who never believed in you to become the person you were meant to be. Thank you for listening to my journey. Now go out there and write your own comeback story. The world is waiting to see what you're capable of. Remember, you are more resilient than you know, more capable than they believe, and more deserving of success than they'll ever understand. Until next time, keep pushing forward. Your future self is counting on it.